Welcome back yet again. Today we're going to talk about materials requirement planning. And what we're going to be taking a look here is at dependent demand. We're going to take a look at materials requirement planning, its input, the bill of materials, or what's called a product structure tree. And we'll show you one here that's already been drawn and talk to you about each level that's in there. An inventory status file, the outputs of materials requirement planning, and the benefits of material requirements planning. So let's start talking about dependent demand items. Dependent demand items are finished product that have a demand for it. And we have the end item, which is our finished product, what we create, but there's also things called parent items that can actually be part of it, which is our raw material or work in progress that another part of our plant might produce, but for our stations, it's our raw materials. So we're going to take a look at what these parent items might be and to get to our finished product and the end item. So we'll be taking a look at this again here in just a minute. So just so that you know that a parent item is somebody else's finished goods, finished product, but it's our raw material. So some expanded information systems that include materials requirement planning is a closed loop materials requirement planning. We're taking a look at a broader scheduling and coordination systems. We want to plan for materials that are required. When do we need to get our materials? When do we need to have them? How much do we need to purchase? When do we need to purchase them? And this is all to make sure that we can produce when we need to produce and how much we need to produce. So we're planning for having our raw materials where we need them, when we need them to have a finished product made when we need to have that completed. That's the demand. We know that we need to have these items at a certain time. There's materials resource planning, which is MRP2. Lots of alphabet soup here, MRP versus MRP2. Results when these capability of closed loops MRP are extended. We're taking a look at all of our resources. We're looking at machines that are going to be used, not just our raw materials, but our equipment, our labor, who's going to be working where, who's going to be doing what project. These are the things that are going to be looking at materials resources planning, or MRP2. There's also enterprise resource planning, or ERP. It's a much broader integrated information system, also known as an information backbone, that we're linking together assorted applications to a system. We're taking a look at labor, at payroll can be added into this. We're taking a look at ordering our materials, working with our suppliers, linking them into this. So our whole enterprise will be linked together with this. So if we take a look at materials requirements planning, MRP, just a general view, there's three important functions: order, planning, and control, priority planning and control, and a provision of a basis for planning capacity requirements and development of our broad business plan. So let's start with the first one, order, planning, and control. When we take a look at order, planning, and control, what we are doing is saying how many are being orders, how many orders do we have coming in, how many things are being ordered, and how much raw material will we need? What do we need to make when? Then we start getting into priority. What takes precedent over something else? What do we want to make sure we have done? What happens if it runs late? Heaven forbid, we can deal with that. But what's priority? If we have an order come in for a customer, a large order, we might say this takes priority over these orders because of the length of time we've had this customer, special customer, great quantity that they order from us, so we want to make sure that they have their needs met first before some, little rinky-dink order that we get once every 10 years, whatever. We're also taking a look at capacity planning. By using MRP, we know how much we're able to make. We know how long it takes to make. We know what our capacity availability is, what our production availability is based on this. So we're able to take and plan for our future. This is working with our strategic plans, both short, medium and long term. If we know that our capacity is at its maximum, we're producing to a maximum capacity, but our orders are coming in and we need to create a larger capacity, then we need to plan for this. And this is what's working in with all of that. If we take a look here at an MRP program, you're going to see what goes into it. Forecasts our business plan, current conditions that are out there, going all the way down to a production plan, master schedules, rough cut capacity checks, going right into the MRP. What do we need to buy? What do we need to make? What do we need to purchase? What's our capacity requirements, vendor feedback? All of this is working in together to get everything there to make sure we have what we need when we need to produce it, so that we have a finished product able to get to the customer when they need it. So what are the inputs of MRP? We start with a master production schedule. In our master production schedule, we work with time buckets. Remember before we talked about using that timeline? And within a timeline, we create a fence. And each one between these two fence posts is equal to the next one. It doesn't look like on my drawing because I'm not drawing to scale, but we create this time fence, and in between each one of these is considered a time bucket. So this is one time bucket, this is another, this is the next one, and each one of those time buckets are equal to each other's. So it's just a time period is all that a time bucket is, and we can create this time fence so that we know how much we are talking about. This can include varying levels of details. We can do a long-term time fence and be very general. But once we get into specific information, into the details, then we need to shorten that time plan, because we can use these time buckets, might be hours. They could be days, it could be weeks, but it can be down to a half-hour period. What are you producing from this time to this time? Especially if it's something that doesn't take long to produce. So the more information, the more detail you have, the smaller your time buckets are going to be to fit that information. With this, we take a look at the bill of materials, or a product structure tree is what we are looking at here. And you see this nice picture of a bicycle, and the bicycle is made up of different components. Well, a bill of materials, or a product structure tree, takes a look at exploding out, starting at a finished good. So here we have our bicycle. It's our finished good. If we take out and start exploding pieces out, we're going to go to the next level, and notice our finished good is considered level 0. We're going to go down to the next level, level 1, and we're going to take a look at our main components. Our main components are the wheels, which have 2 pieces, and a 1 piece or frame, the frame. Just one of those. So we're looking at that. We can take it and we can further explode this out. And we have the wheels, have the sub-assemblies, the rims, the tires, the spokes, and it gives a number of pieces there. Off the tire, you have the tire valve. The next level, more sub-assemblies of sub-assemblies. To the 4th level, going down, you have the bolts, the nuts, the caps that are needed for the tire valve. So we take a look at this. Now, if we are producing our own bike frames, then that would also be done. If we purchase our bike frames and all we're doing is painting them the color, then this right here is actually becomes a parent item. It's somebody else's finished product, and all we're doing is using their finished product within our production here. When it gets down to raw materials, it's going to be pure raw material, or it can be, like again, a parent item, somebody else's finished goods. So we're taking a look at exploding this out to find what each part is that needs to go in here. And this is important because this gives us pretty much our shopping list. What do we need to have before we can build the bicycle? The different levels. The lower the level, the higher up it is to the finished good. Level 0, again, is a finished good. Main components at level 1, getting into subassemblies and subassemblies of subassemblies, going all the way down. This right here is a picture of a single level bill. A multi-level bill can include multiple items. So if this is man's style bike, we might have a different style frame for a woman's bike, and it would be a little bit different, but we would have possibly the same saddle on both, use of the same tires on both, the same spokes on both. So we're able to put these together so we know how many we'll be creating, how many spokes we need to create, no matter how many bicycles we make, whether it's the male frame or the female frame, frame A or frame B. So we're looking at those items also. We use this exploding bill and the product structure tree, the bill of materials and the product structure tree, to create an inventory status file. This is also known as a time-phased inventory status record. And these are very important. I really want you to know and understand these. This is a record for one item that we use in our production. So if it is the bike saddle, if it's the seat, if it is the spokes, whatever, it's one item is this inventory status record, so we know how many we have and how many we need to order. It is a planning tool. I need to really stress that. This is a planning tool. And the pieces that are in this start with gross requirements. I often write gross requirements as GR. Gross requirements tell you how many you plan on using. How many you plan on using is gross requirements. What are you going to be required to use during that time bucket to produce what you need to produce? Scheduled receipts, I use the abbreviation SR. Scheduled receipts are how many are you receiving? What's coming in? You've placed an order, it's coming into your factory, it's being delivered. Scheduled receipts are your deliveries. And they're open orders and what you plan on ordering. So it's stuff you've already ordered and what you plan on ordering. Both of these are done and looked at during the whole time bucket. On-hand projections, which I list OH on hand, is an end of the time bucket. How many are left over? How many do you have at the end of that time period? We're going to take a look at allocated items that are already promised for things, or coverage, safety stock. What do we have that we can use? Net requirements, NR. Net requirements are a need. How many do you need to order? We're going to be taking a look at multiple ways of ordering in just a few minutes. And this is very important to understand that our need and how much we ordered aren't always the same. So net requirements tells us we have a need. How much do we need to order? And then we have our planned order releases, or POR. We take a look here at how many do we plan on ordering. And we can do what's called lot for lot ordering, which is ordering what we need when we need it, no more. It tells us of a low level code. It says that if we have a plan to order, it means we don't have enough. We need to get more. Then we can have the planned order release at a certain time to make sure we have this in. Our planned order release is an action message. It is telling you to place an order. Call up, send in an email, whatever, get that order so that you get what you need when you need it so you can produce. If you don't have your raw materials, your items, parent items, or raw materials to make this end item, you can't produce. You can't make money. So it's very important to take a look at this. Some other information here, the outputs of MRP. Literally, this is an information system that lets us know when we want to order, how much we want to order, and when we're going to get things in so we can produce these amounts at these times. So it helps us set a schedule. It helps us with revision because this is very easy to revise. And although we'll be calculating this by hand in here, you can set up a program using Excel to create this. And I do believe that there are multiple computer programs out there that also can do this. You could do what if simulations with this. What happens if we produce more here and less here? We still need to produce for this date, but I'm going to produce this item here so I can use machinery to do this item here and this product, the differentiation. So we're taking a look at when do I want to produce here? What do I want to produce there? What happens if I mix this up? When do I have to have stuff in? When do I have to order things, etc. Financial information. It lets you know how much you need, how much money you need to pay your bills, how much money you need for labor, how much money you need for the raw materials. It lets you know when you're going to be paying bills. It gives us that financial information. And it also has additional editing capabilities as along with those what ifs. What happens if you get a order that takes precedence over other orders in there? What happens if there are changes that need to be made? What happens if, this is October right now, we just had hurricane come through and there's flooding. What happens if I don't have the ability to get my raw materials due to weather, due to accidents on the road? Am I going to have enough to be able to continue working along? So we're able to look at those items also in here. And also transportation, finished goods will be finished when, so that I can set up transportation to get them out, to get that whole supply chain. So raw materials coming in and finished goods going out, and the transportation of both. So let's look at an inventory status record example here, and we're going to start with what's called lot for lot ordering, which is ordering what you need when you need it and nothing more. So the gross requirements, on-hand inventory, and scheduled receipts for dense foam for the inner shell of a bicycle helmet are indicated in the time-phased inventory status record on the next slide. Its lead time is 3 weeks. Complete the inventory status record showing when planning orders should be placed. Use lot for lot ordering. So we're going to take a look here at an inventory status record. And old school was index cards that these were used on. We take a look here at dense foam. It also gives us information in this top left-hand corner of our lead time. Remember, LT is lead time and 3 weeks. That means from the time we place an order, we should receive it 3 weeks later. Because we have weeks here, we know that our time buckets are in weeks. And we have 8 time buckets or 8 weeks listed on this. Now, we have our gross requirements listed down here on our left-hand side. So for week 1, we need 125 units to be able to produce what we need of this dense foam. We need 325 units in week 2, going on with week 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 listed there. we already have scheduled receipts coming in of 450 units in week 1 and 425 units in week 2. We're looking here at things that are ordered on this last inventory status record report that was run. We put these orders in. On hand, notice we have a number listed here on hand. At the end of our last time bucket, 100 units were left on hand. So we have available 100 units to be able to use. We have a place to write our net requirements, what our needs will be, and planned order releases. When do we plan on placing these orders? So let's take a look on what we need to do. Down at the bottom of the page, I am going to be using this as scrap paper so you can see the math that I'm doing. And I'm going to start with week 1. On hand, week 1, I have 100 units of my dense foam. I have a scheduled receipt coming in of 450 units. If I do my math right, that means I have 550 units that I'm able to use at this point. My gross requirement for week 1, and that's an addition, by the way, gross requirements from week 1 is a subtraction. I plan on using 125 units. That would leave me 425 units at the end of week 1. So up here on hand, end of week 1, I'm going to write 425 units because that's how much I have left over. The end of week 1, I have 425 units of dense foam on hand. So if I move on to week 2, I'm taking what was left over. What I have on hand is 425 units. How many do I plan on using? Or how many do I plan on getting in? What do I have for receipts this week? Deliveries? Nothing. So that leaves me 425 units that I'm able to use during this week. My gross requirement for the week, how many do I plan on using? 325, which if I did my math right, leaves me 100 units at the end of week 2. So up here at the end of week 2, I'm going to write that I have 100 units left over. I don't care how many units you have left over, you always have to write the number left on hand. That always has to be in there, okay? Moving on to week 3. On hand was 100 units. I'm going to add in a scheduled receipt of 425 units, which gives me 525 units that I'm able to use. How many do I plan on using? 275. My gross requirements need to be subtracted out. And if I do the math right, I should have 250 units at the end of week 3. Where does it go? The on hand. So 250 units at the end of week 3. Week 4. For week 4, I have 250 units. I have no scheduled receipts at this time. Remember, this is all planning. So I have 250 units we'll be able to use. How many do we plan on using? Our gross requirements. 200 units, which leaves us 50 units left over. That again goes on hand. For week 5, I have 50 units on hand. I don't have any scheduled receipts at this point, so that leaves me 50 units. How many do I plan on using in week 5? 300, my gross requirements. That leaves me with a negative. I have a need. In week 5, I am short 250 units. So that's my net requirement. In week 5, I have a need of 250 units. If I have a need, I have to place an order. So my lead time was 3 weeks. So I'm going to go back 1, 2, 3 weeks, and I'm going to place an order lot for lot. I order what I need, when I need it, no more, no less, for what I need. 250 units. If I place an order, I better receive that order. Lead time is 3 weeks. So 3 weeks later, I now need to schedule a receipt, a delivery of 250 units of dense foam. Now that I have a receipt, scheduled receipt coming in, I can redo week 5. Just like before, on hand, 50 units, plus the 250 I plan on getting in, which will give me 300 units to use. My gross requirements are 300 units, which will leave me the goose egg, or 0 left on hand. I still need to write that 0 in. I can go on to week 6. Week 6, I have 0 left on hand and 0 scheduled receipts, which gives me 0. I can do that one in my head, no calculator needed. How many do I plan on using in week 6? 175, which means I have a negative of 175 telling me I have a need, or a net requirement of 175. Again, I'm going to go back 1, 2, 3 weeks, and I'm going to place an order now in week 3 for the number of units I need, 175. If I place an order, I better receive that order. So my scheduled receipts, 3 weeks later, would be for 175 units in week 6. Now that I have a planned receipt in week 6, I can redo week 6. I have 0 at the end of week 5. I have a scheduled receipt of 175 units. That gives me 175 units I'm able to use during week 6. How many do I plan on using? My gross requirements again were 175, so I subtract those out. And if I subtract those out, I get the goose egg again for on hand at the end of week 6. Let's move along to week 7. Looking at week 7, how many did I have left on hand at the end of week 6? 0. What's my scheduled receipts? Nothing, leaves me with a goose egg. How many do I plan on using in week 7? I plan on using 350. It tells me I have a need. I need 350 units. If I go back 1, 2, 3 weeks, that means I need to plan to place an order in week 4 for 350 units. If I place an order in week 4 for 350 units, when do I plan on receiving that? Lead time of 3 weeks. I plan on receiving that 3 weeks later in week 7, 350 units. Now that I have a planned receipt, that scheduled receipt, I can now redo week 7. So I start with 0 on hand, and I have a scheduled receipt of 350. That allows me 350 units to be used during week 7. I plan on using all 350 units, and it leaves me with 0 left on hand at the end of week 7. Moving right along to week 8. How many do I have on hand at the beginning of week 8, end of week 7? 0. How many do I have a scheduled receipt for at this time? 0. That leaves me a goose egg to use for week 8. How many do I need for week 8? Plan on using my gross requirements is 250. That leaves me 250 units short. So I have a net requirement, a need of 250 units for week 8. If I have a need in week 8, when do I need to order it? Lead time 3 weeks. Go back 1, 2, 3 weeks. 250 units are needed for week, or need to be ordered in week 5. So my planned order to release is 250 units in week 5. If I place an order in week 5, when am I going to get it in? Lead time is 3 weeks, so I go up to schedule a receipt in week 8 for the number of units that I ordered, 250 units. I can now redo week 8, starting with 0 at the end of week 7, having a receipt of 250 units, giving me 250 units to use. I plan on using gross requirements, 250 units, leaving me 0 left on hand. Some things to notice about this lot for lot ordering. You always order what you need when you need it. No more, no less. We're going to move on to taking a look at more reality. This is a perfect world, and we don't always live in that perfect world. Reality doesn't always let us be there. So we're going to take this information and add to it. Let's look at adding in safety stock. What did we say safety stock was? Safety stock is stock that we have on hand in case a truck is late. Safety stock is what we have on hand in case we have poor quality. If we're looking at dense foam, maybe there was an air bubble in a piece of dense foam, so we have to cut around that. So you want to have that little extra on hand just in case. Still working with dense foam, still working with 3 weeks lead time, we're adding in safety stock. Safety stock is 25 units. So that means our on hand always must say 25 or up. We have to have at least 25 units on hand. We're going to start off the exact same way, looking at week 1 here. Looking at week 1, how many do we have on hand at the end of our last time block? 100 units. Do we have a scheduled receipt? Sure do, of 450 units. That leaves us 550 units to use in week 1. How many units do we plan on using? In other words, what are our gross requirements? 125 units. This will leave us 425 units left at the end of the time period, the time bucket. So left on hand is 425 units. Week 2. How much was left on hand at the end of week 1? 425 units. Do we have a scheduled receipt? Nope. That leaves us 425 units that we're able to use during this time bucket. How many do we plan on using? Our gross requirements. We plan on using 325 units, which gives us 100 units at the end of time bucket 2, or at the end of week 2. Both of these numbers, notice, are well above 25, our safety stock. We're still good. We're doing wonderful. Week 3, we start with 100 units on hand. We have a scheduled receipt of 450 units. That gives us 550 units to use during time bucket 3 or week 3. How many do we plan on using? 275 units. That leaves us with 275 units left over to use later. Still above 25, our safety stock is accounted for. We're doing great. Week 4, how many's left on hand at the end of week 3? 275 units. Do we have a scheduled receipt for week 4? We sure don't, which leaves us 275 units to use during week 4 or time bucket 4. How many do we plan on using our gross requirements for time bucket 4? 200 units of the dense foam, which leaves us 75 units. Still above 25 units are safety stock, so we're good to go. Week 5, how many are left over on hand at the end of week 4? 75 units. Do we have a scheduled receipt? Not at this time. So at this point, we're looking at 75 units to use. But what are our gross requirements? 300. That leaves us needing 225. But wait a minute, we've got a need. And if we have a need, we need to take a look at our safety stock. Remember we said we needed at least 25 units and it had to be 25 or above? This is well below. I need to take into consideration that I have to have at least 25 units left over. So I'm going to subtract out another 25 and say my need really isn't 225 units, it's actually 250 units. So my need is what? Net requirements. So I have a net requirement of 250 units for week 5. We're still using a lot ordering here, a lot for lot. We're ordering what we need when we need it. So if we have a need for 250 units with a 3-week, 1, 2, 3-week lead time, that means I'm going to place my order back in week 2. Remember, this is all planning. If I place an order in week 2, what should happen? I should get the order in. If you're not getting your orders in, find a new supplier. So if I place it here in week 2, it's a 3-week lead time. In week 5, I'm going to get in a scheduled receipt of 250 units. So if I redo week 5, I have 75 left on hand. I have a scheduled receipt of 250 units. This gives me 325 units to use during week 5. My gross requirements are 300 units, which leaves me 25. 25 still is good. We have to have at least 25 units, and we have that here. So 25 left over on hand satisfies our safety stock. We're good to go. Let's look now at week 6, planning for week 6. Taking a look at week 6, we have 25 left on hand at the end of week 5. At this point, we have no scheduled receipts, which leaves us 25 to be able to use during the time period. We plan on using our gross requirements 175 units, which means we're short 150. But we're not just short 150, we need to take into consideration our safety stock. So let's subtract out the number of units we have to have in our safety stock, and we notice we're actually short 175 units. So our net requirements are 175. If we have a need for week 6 of 175 units, what do we need to do? We need to figure out when we're going to order it. Our lead time says 3 weeks, so we go back 1, 2, 3 weeks to place an order in week 3. If we place an order in week 3, we better be getting it in 3 weeks later. So 175 units are now scheduled to be delivered, our scheduled receipts for week 6, and we can redo week 6. We had 25 left on hand at the end of week 5. We now have a scheduled receipt of 175, which gives us available 200 units for week 6. How many do we plan on using? Our gross requirements. We plan on using 175 of those, which leaves us 25 units at the end of week 6. It satisfies our safety stock, at least 25 units. Week 7. At the end of week 6, on hand were 25 units. At this point, we have no scheduled receipt. We plan on using our gross requirements 350 units. That leaves us 325 units short. Oh, but wait a minute. Let's take into consideration our safety stock. So we're actually 350 units short. So we have a net requirement of 350 units. If we have a need, we need to plan an order so that we can schedule in a receipt so we have enough to work with. How much dense foam do we need to order? We need to order 350 units 1, 2, 3 weeks in advance, which would be week 4. Then we need to schedule that receipt in. Don't forget to schedule your receipts, because if you place an order, you better get an order in. Get a new supplier if you're not getting your orders in. So we now have a scheduled receipt for week 7 of 350 units. So let's redo week 7. We start off on hand 25 units. We now have 350 units scheduled to come in, which gives us 375 units to be able to use during week 7. We plan on using 350 of those, leaving us 25. 25 satisfies our safety stock, so we are good to go with 25 left on hand at the end of week 7, which takes us up to week 8. How many are left on hand at the end of week 7? 25. Do we have a scheduled receipt? No. How many do we plan? That leaves us 25 left to use during week 8. How many do we plan on using? 250, which tells us we have a need of 225. But again, take into consideration safety stock. So let's subtract out how many we need for safety stock. And it says our actual net requirement, our actual need is 250 units. If we have a need for 250 units, that means we need to place an order with a 3-week lead time. We go back 1, 2, 3 weeks to week 5, and we're going to place an order for 250 units because this is still lot for lot. If we place an order, we better receive an order. So if we're placing an order in week 5, lead time of 3 weeks, we'll get it in week 8. So I can now redo week 8. I have 25 left on hand at the end of week 7. I have a scheduled receipt of 250, which gives me 275 units to be able to use. I need to use my gross requirements, 250, which leaves me 25. 25 satisfies my safety stock, and we are able to place that as our on hand at the end of week 8, which actually will become, for our next inventory status record, written right here, what was left end of the last time period. We are going to move on to get very realistic. Let's take a look at true reality in ordering. Okay, so reality in ordering. We're still working with our dense foam. We still have 3 weeks lead time. We still have a safety stock of 25 units, which means on hand has to read 25 units. But welcome to reality. We're now adding in a minimum order, which means our planned order releases has to be at least 400 units. We cannot order less than 400 units. And not only that, let's double whammy you and say after those 400 units, you have to order in lots of 50 units. So our lot size after minimum says you can order 400, you can order 450, you can order 500, you cannot order 326, you cannot order 422. It has to be in 50s. You cannot order 587. You have to order in lots of 50 after that minimum. So our dense foam can be ordered 400, 450, 500, 550, 600, etc. Our safety stocks, 25. We have to have at least 25 here. So we need to keep this in mind as we are working this problem, because this is reality. So let's start again with week 1. At this point, you should be able to do these first couple of weeks without even me helping you. So go ahead and work it while I start working it here. Starting on hand, week 1 of 100 units. We have a scheduled receipt of 450 units, which gives us 550 units to be able to use. We plan on using our gross requirements, 425 units. That means, our gross requirements are 125 units, which leaves us with 425 units. So our on hand, which satisfies our safety stock, is 425 units, much larger than that 25. Week 2, we have left on hand 425 units. We have no scheduled receipts, which means we have 425 units that we are able to use during time bucket 2. We plan on using our gross requirements, 325, which leaves 100 units available at the end of the second time bucket, week 2. Moving on to week 3. Week 3, we start with 100 on hand from the end of week 2. We do have a scheduled receipt of 450 units, which means we have 550 units we are able to use during time bucket 3 or week 3. We plan on using 275. If I do the math right, that means we're going to have 275 left over, still satisfying our safety stock, which has to be at least 25 units at the end of week 3. Moving right along to week 4. Are you doing this with me? How you doing? We had 275 units left on hand at the end of week 3, and we have no scheduled receipts, which means we have 275 units that we are able to use during our 4th time bucket or our 4th week. How many do we have scheduled to use? What are our gross requirements for that? 200, which will leave us 75 units, still greater than the 25 we need to have on hand. Moving right along to week 5. Now this is where things change up because again, we're adding in our minimum order and our lot size after minimum. So we have things we need to take into consideration here. So we're going to start with week 5 with 75 units that were on hand at the end of week 4. At this point, we have no scheduled receipts, which leaves us 75 units to work with. We plan on using 300 units, which means we are 225 units short. But remember our safety stock we need to take safety stock into consideration. So we're actually 250 units short. We have a need. A need is a net requirement of 250 units. Now, can we order 250 units? No, our minimum order size is 400 units. 400 units is greater than 250, so that's how much I'm going to order at this point. I can take a look 3 weeks, 1, 2, 3 weeks in advance. I'm going to order 400 units. Why 400? It's my minimum order size. I have to order at least 400 units. If I order 400 units, how many should I get in? Well, whatever you order is what you should get in. So if I order 400 units in week 2, 1, 2, 3 week lead time, in week 5, I should get 400 units in. Make sure you schedule that receipt before you go ahead and redo week 5. I have 75 units left on hand at the end of week 4, my time bucket 4. I'm getting 400 units in, which is going to give me 475 units able to use. I need to use 300 of those units, which gives me 175 units left over. So on hand at the end of week 5 is 175 units. It is greater than 25. My safety stock is satisfied. I'm able to move on to look at week 6. Now you might have some questions. Hold off just to the end because we're going to talk about this whole thing and some other things that can happen after we finish working out this inventory, time inventory status here. So time phase inventory status record. There's a whole term for you. Week 6, I have 175 at the end of week 5. At this point, I have 0 scheduled receipts, which leaves me with 175 units. I plan on using 175 units, which leaves me a goose egg. Can I have a goose egg? No, I can't. Safety stock says 25 units. So let me subtract out my 25 units, which means I am 25 units short. I have a net requirement of 25 units. Can I order 25 units? Nope. I have a minimum order size. I have to order at least 400 units. So if I go back 1, 2, 3 weeks, I'm going to place an order for 400 units. If you place an order, you need to get that order in. So 3 weeks later, 400 units should be delivered in week 6. So if I go to redo my week 6, I have 175 units on hand at the end of week 5. I now have a scheduled receipt of 400 units, which is going to give me 575 units. I plan on using my gross requirements, 175, which leaves me 400 units left over at the end of week 6. It satisfies my safety stock. We're good to go. Let's look at week 7. In week 7, we take a look at what was left on hand at the end of week 6. I had 400 units left over at the end of week 6, and at this point I have no scheduled receipts, which gives me 400 units to be able to use of this dense foam to make the helmets in week 7. How many do I plan on using? My gross requirements, 350, which gives me 50 left over at the end of week 7. That satisfies my safety stock. It's above 25. I'm good to go. Let's take a look at week 8. Week 8, I had 50 units left over at the end of week 7. I have no scheduled receipts, which gives me 50 units to be able to use. I plan on using my gross requirements, 250 units, which means I'm short 200. But let's not forget safety stock. So let's subtract out those 25 I need for safety stock. So I am short, or I have a net requirement of 225 units in week 8. If I need 225 units, how many do I have to order? Well, my minimum order is 400. So I need to go back lead time 1, 2, 3 weeks and order 400 units to be able to have it delivered in week 8. If you're gonna place an order, schedule your receipt of an order, and however much you order is how much you should be receiving. So now that I have a receipt, I can redo week 8. I have 50 at the end of week 7 left over. I'm getting in 400 units, which gives me 450 units to use. I plan on using 250 of those, which is 200 units left over at the end of week 8. Now, this is fine if we don't want to order any extra. But if we only need 25 units, do you really want to order 400? This is a planning tool. So I can now look at this and say, maybe I want to order 450 here because I have to order in 25 or in 50 units at a time, so that I have this week covered, week 6, and I can order more later. Week 7, maybe I want to order 500 to help me get through a couple more weeks. What happens if I'm going to shut down, or the people who are delivering us this dense foam is shut down for the week of July 4th, and week 6 is actually the week of July 4th. So I need to make sure that my orders here are pushed to week 5, or can I schedule that stuff for week 7, because we're still working even though they're not, and they're not delivering that week. So I can do that what if scenarios and start looking to see how I can change this reality in ordering, so I don't have a need of 25, so that if something is a holiday week, I can change that and move things one way or another, so that I have what I need when I need it to be able to continue to produce. That's reality. With using a time-phased inventory report, it does help out. It does give us a lot of information, and it lets us plan out and move things around so that we know when the best time to order will be. Especially, dense foam isn't going to go bad that quickly. So we can use it and store it for 2 weeks. That's not a big deal, and order it at an earlier time. So that allows us to do things like that. So what are some conditions that really make MRP effective to use? Number 1 is training and discipline. You need to understand what you are doing, when you are doing it, why you are doing it. And you have to do it on a regular basis. It's not a hit or miss scheduling that you can do. You really have to be trained on this and understand the reasonings behind it. And you have to take a look and have the discipline to continue to use it. Otherwise, it's not going to work for you. You have to have a realistic master production schedule. That gross requirements. You have to know how many you truly will use. If you're not sure what that is and you're not sure what your demand is, then you're not going to really know how much you need to produce when to make sure you have those raw materials. So that realistic master production schedule becomes very important. That's done through accurate data, accurate forecasting. And it's, forecasting, as we said, is not 100% perfect, but it gives you an idea. You have to know what your orders are to know what that demand will be. Adequate quality. This is really who your supplier is when we talk quality, because it's quality control. Yes, we can put in safety stock in case, like I said, there was an air bubble in a piece of foam that we're not able to use that section, or it was compressed too much and it's too hard. It's not the right width. It wasn't cut properly. It's too thin. It's whatever. So we're looking at an adequate quality to make sure that you have good raw materials. Because if you don't have those good raw materials and you're not putting in enough safety stock, then you're going to have a problem, because you're going to have to shut down production until you can get the next batch in, until you have that next order coming in. The actual lead times should meet your schedule. By working with your supplier, which we're going to talk later about in JIT 2, just in time 2, you'll know your lead times. You'll know how long it takes to get this raw material in. By knowing that information, by having it, you're able to efficiently work with MRP and these inventory, these time phase inventory status records, to be able to meet the schedule and have the materials when you need it. What are some benefits from using MRP? You know your inventory. You have the inventory you need to produce. That's very important. Having that inventory. Knowing when you need to purchase more inventory. How much do you have on hand? How much do you need to purchase? When do you need to purchase it? What your production schedule is. You understand your production schedule, which also leads with demand and forecasting, so you know what your sales will be. You understand that if you produce, you can sell. That's important. When the engineering, if there's any changes in how you do things, you use X number of units of this dense foam, in the helmet that you make. Well, you change up the engineering of that helmet. You might use more dense foam, less dense foam. It's easy to change in here, which leads to our planning. We can plan in what we need, but we can also plan in changes. If the engineering or our design changes somewhat, we can quickly go in and make those changes using the product structure tree, knowing how much is in each product, how it changes to revert it into those gross requirements, and how much you're going to need for each time bucket. This also helps with our scheduling. We'll know when we're able to produce, what we're able to produce, how much we're able to produce, how many people we need. All of those things are included in there. And lastly, finance. We know when the bills are due. You know when you're ordering something, and you'll know by talking with your supplier, is it cash on demand? You buy it, you got to pay for it right there. Is it 30-day? Is it a 60-day notice? So from the time you receive it, you have 30 days to pay that bill. You'll know this, so you'll know how much money you need. All of that's involved. All of that takes a look at what's important and how MRP can help you run your business better, be more efficient, be more effective in producing. All of this comes together. You do have some homework with this. Check out your homework, get that done. It's taking a look at both lot for lot. And when you take a look at lot for lot says you order what you need when you need it. Now, storage is a reason, insurance is a reason, stuff going bad. If you're baking and you're making strawberry pies, you only want to order the strawberries you're going to use because strawberries go bad quickly. So you want to make sure that you're using what you have, and it's not going bad. You're not ordering too much or too little. So looking at that, that's one of the reasons for lot to lot. Reality is you usually have some type of safety stock in there, depending, using rule of thumb, like we learned in the last chapter, using experience, using industry data, will help you decide on how much safety stock you actually need. And once, like I said, minimum order size, sometimes there's a lot size after minimum. You can't order one paperclip. You order paperclips usually by a box of 100. And that first order of the paper clips might be 10 boxes of 100 that you have to order, so you're ordering 1,000 paper clips. So these are some things that you need to take a look at to figure out, that lot size after minimum, etc. So we're going to go on in just a little bit talking about that just in time. So go ahead and do your homework on this now, and I'll see you later.